This meeting is being recorded.
Welcome, everyone. We are excited to have today's webinar on how to tackle your supply chain challenges with the right project manager. We see we've got a lot of participants that are enrolled, so I feel like this is a hot topic, especially nowadays when we know that there's a lot of projects and implementations going on. But before we kick it off, I do want just to small disclosure and let everyone know that the information discussed in this session represents the views of the individuals and does not constitute legal advice or the views of Alpine. Please consult with your organization's leadership and legal counsel as you need for specific situations. Welcome. We're going to be discussing just the right project manager, and I will be your moderator. My name is Brenda Stoltz. I am one of the senior managing directors for Alpine Supply Chain Solutions, and I lead our HR's solutions practice. And specifically, my team really helps with any kind of systems implementation as they do the SOPs, training, and go-live support. But before we kick it off, we do want to do a quick poll for all the participants that are on. If you have the opportunity, please answer the questions that should be popping up on your screen. Awesome. And today's presenter will be Greg Utter. So Greg is another senior managing director with Alpine, and he's got over 35 years of progressive hands-on experience with a broad range of mission-critical supply chain technologies. He has a deep domain expertise across a variety of solution sets, including supply chain execution, supply chain planning, labor management solutions, and supply chain advanced analytics. Greg also has extensive experience evaluating and implementing all supply chain related software solutions. So we could not have picked a better presenter for today, and he's going to walk you through the topics. Before we kick it off, though, we were not surprised to see how many people registered for this session. So if you go to the next slide, as really, project statistics and implementations is something that, one, is very important, two, happens pretty often, but three, unfortunately, has a high likelihood of failure if not planned for and managed appropriately. So 65 to 85% of IT-based projects fail. An average IT-based project overruns its budget by 27%. 1 in 6 projects have cost overruns of 200 plus and schedule overruns of 70%. And around 17% of IT-based projects threaten the viability of the company. The more money spent on the project, the more likelihood it is to fail. And so this is why we at Alpine Supply Chain Solutions thought this was going to be a great topic, and we'd love to just give you guys some tips and advice on how to strategically and successfully get through any kind of implementation by ensuring that you have the right project manager on board. So without further ado, I'll turn over to Greg.
Okay, thanks. Can we have a look at the poll results, Dave?
Oh, yes. Look at that. So first question, do you have a project management office at your company today? 60% of you answered yes, which is a great thing to see. And not surprisingly enough, 100% also said that they have experienced a failed project. Thank you all for your participation. One thing I did forget to mention as well, we will be using the chat and the Q&A functionality for this. So if you have any questions, please go ahead and type them. I'll be looking at them and we'll be answering them at the end of the webinar.
Thanks, Brenda. I appreciate it. And to everybody on the phone, I appreciate you joining us this afternoon. My name is Greg Utter. So the topic that you already saw, tackle your supply chain challenges with the right project manager. I just got to say, those are pretty staggering statistics that Brenda shared earlier. I've been a part of a lot of failed projects or have heard of a lot of failed projects. And as the poll results showed, the majority of the people on this webinar have as well. The theme to this is football based. And I've just got to say, I, for one, am pretty happy that the football season is starting. We can have a show of hands if everybody was on video, but I'm sure a lot of you out there feel the same way as I do, ready for the hot summer to end and the football magic to begin. So here's kind of the topics that we're going to cover today. And I've broken them down in 4 categories as we're moving through the slides. So what does it take for the project to succeed? What does a project team typically look like? The role of the project manager, what they are and what they aren't, and then the roles of the supporting team. So first off, what does it take for the project to succeed? So there's a lot of variables out there, but when we boil it down, and I'm referencing a book called Traction by Gino Wickman, What it really boils down to is you really need a project manager or managers if it's a large project with multiple arms and legs that has these three fundamental attributes. G, they get it. W, they want it. And C, they've got the capacity to do it. So all three of those are categorically important to ensure that you have a successful project. I know everybody on the webinar has heard, the analogy, did they volunteer or were they voluntold? And I can tell you from experience, those that are voluntold to be on these projects usually aren't the right person in the right seat. So just keep in the back of your mind, they need GWC. They get it, they want it, and they have the capacity to do it. All those put together will help aid in coming together with a good project plan. So here's one just example of a project team and how a lot of them that we work with are laid out and the people that are involved in it. At the very top is the team owner, right? That's the project sponsor. It's the person at the very top that gets elevated to the overall responsibility and the success of the project. So underneath them are some key players, the people who do the work, the boots on the ground, if you will. On the bottom left, from left to right, is the project manager, and we're going to call this individual the offensive coach, right? The offensive coach is supposed to come up with the solution and the answer that's best for everybody within the project, right? So it's part of the customer team. There could be some SMEs. The SMEs are responsible for being the subject matter experts or on all things that are relative to the project. And it can be a mix of people supporting them from operations and IT. Very rarely have I seen a successful project where you have one pillar of the company that's representing all facets. So it's very important to have SMEs, operations, and IT all involved. And then in the middle at the bottom is the project manager under the defensive coach line, right? And we're going to call this team and this part of the project management under defense, the vendor team, right? They've got the product expertise. They're the ones that have coded the product. They understand the details. They get in the weeds. But I can tell you that their main goal is to keep it in the box. They want to sell and design and implement a base vanilla solution. So it's up to them to make sure that they aren't selling a solution with modifications that are needed, cost overruns, the types of things that can delay a project. And that can be counterintuitive when the offensive coach, the solution architect, wants to put together a solution that's the best fit for the company. So there's always debate and healthy conversations between these two. And then on the bottom right is the project manager. We're going to call that the special teams coach, right? Special teams really materialize the results of the overall project. It's got a very clear organizational impact that will help either define where the project is going successfully or help call out areas where the project isn't going successfully. And this has to do with the organizational impact with regards to testing, training, standard operating procedure development, work instruction development, all the things that follow categorically the steps that exist within a comprehensive, detailed project plan. So what are the attributes of an effective project manager, right? So here are 7 things that they are. So they are going to be organized, they're communicative, they're driven, they're structured and aligned with the team, they're very disciplined, goal-oriented, and show strategic leadership capabilities. Because this project and all project isn't just about screwing in the software and making it work. So the overall responsibility falls on the project manager to make sure that there's no scope creep, to make sure that you adhere to what was written to the letter in the statement of work. Oftentimes the statement of work gets written, it gets looked at, it gets signed off on, but it's never referenced again. So it's a very good idea to keep that statement of work ready, published, on your desk, behind your desk, bulleted with sticky notes to make sure everything's been following changed. Then what's also very important is documenting all changes. So oftentimes in these projects, especially those that are of a longer duration, there's a chance that you could have leadership changes. And when that happens, often the new leader that comes in, and it could be the top spot, it could be the project sponsor, they want questions, they want to know why the project is where it is, and they may come in with some preconceived ideas on how they want it to run. So it's very important that the project manager adheres to the SOW, document any changes and decisions so they can be referenced if in fact a new leadership does come on board. So the next question is often that we're asked is, who is the best PM person? Who is the one that can effectively do this and do it well? I can tell you that there's a debate on whether those people should be internal to the company or external to the company. We've often found that a project manager who is external to the company might be better for several reasons. And some of those would include they have no hidden agenda. They're there to make sure that the project runs on time with adherence to the SOW, the adherence to the budget, and the adherence to the end goal. So they don't have any hidden agendas. Typically, they carry no company baggage, right? They don't come up with, but we've always done it this way. This is the way that we've done it in the past. So again, oftentimes an external resource for that project manager might be something that is a viable option for your coming project. The PM also needs to monitor and control the scope and the budget. When documenting the changes, they want to put together and socialize a clear path from where we were, where we are now, and where we're expecting to be. Also educating the new people that's coming on board within this project on what we did and why, and document what was done. If it's, again, a long-term project, oftentimes there are several phases that incorporate different individuals from both the vendor side, the customer side, and if in fact you have a third-party integrator. So the roles of the supporting players. So there's often a steering committee, a steering team. There will be an overall solution architect that has their finger on the pulse of the operation and has their finger on the pulse of the IT, just to make sure the interfaces are working correctly and everybody's dialed into the same end goal. Then there are operations SMEs. These are often people drawn out of the operations that do it day in and day out, and they understand the small nuances that the company does that may not be documented and it may not be well known. I can tell you from experience, we've gone through very due diligent design phases, gotten into the testing and gotten into the training, and have had people raise their hands and say, well, but wait a minute, what about the third Tuesday of every month when we have to do XYZ? Which was never discussed during design, and it was never discussed until it got to the point where we were doing testing and training. So keep those people with boots on the ground in the mix when it's something that their input is readily viable and the information they're providing will help provide success to the project. The leader doesn't necessarily need to be an expert on all things that are project related. That's why the supporting players and the supporting roles are so important. Consider this team the people on the sidelines, the ones with the Gatorade, the kicker that comes in every once in a while. Don't forget about the supporting cast. And also, they're the technical and integration SMEs. They're the ones that are on the IT related side. But again, they have to have a very good relationship and open dialogue with operations to make sure that everybody understands why they're doing this and they're not doing it just because that's the way they've done it before. And then lastly, on this slide are the CSR SMEs. I know I'm using a lot of acronyms. So CSR is the client side responsibilities. It's been our experience that when a customer brings on a new piece of software, whether it's warehouse management, transportation management, labor, ERP, no matter what it is, they may not have the bench strength to fully satisfy all the requirements that are needed throughout the project lifecycle. The vendor will support in most cases, but they normally don't lead and they don't do the heavy lifting when it comes to testing, training, go live support, SOPs, work instructions. So the CSR SMEs are a vital role in making sure that your project is successful and comes off on time. And that, again, is influenced through the testing, the training, the unit testing, and then the SOPs, work instructions, and go live support. So here are some of the factors that contribute to a successful project. And these are narratives that we got from people outside of the Alpine umbrella. These are from people that we've talked to. We do post-go live audits. And here are kind of the top things and the top factors that contribute to a successful project. There was a project champion, somebody who is ultimately responsible for the success of the project, and they live on the customer side. They don't always agree with the people below them, but the people below them may not always agree with what their direction or information that they're providing is. Their next key was responsiveness, and this comes from all facets of the project, from the customer side, the vendor side, and then in fact the third-party integrator. So responsiveness is key. Good news, bad news doesn't get better with age. And then the next was following the coordinated project plan. There will be deviations from your project plan. There will be stops, there will be blockers, there will be delays. But as long as you follow that coordinated plan and have a PM who's on top of any of these delays, any of these blockers with names and attributes assigned to it, it will continue to be successful. Those that raise their hand, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, that said, hey, I disagree with this decision. I don't think that we're going down the right path. Don't muffle those people. Let them have a voice that's heard, document it, follow through. And then they were open to process changes. This goes back to one of my earlier slides where it talked about the vendor wanting to provide a vanilla solution that gave you out of the box functionality, which is fine, and we will sign up for that. But if it's important to do modifications, small or large, in order to meet the business model, that's what you have to be open to. The other side of the process changes is they won't be doing things tomorrow the same way that they do it today. So coaching and evaluating is very important. The next one is the project had dedicated resources. And this can sometimes be an issue, specifically if the project stalls for whatever reason. I'll give an example. Back in COVID days, we were in the middle of a very long strategic project. COVID hit, people were gone, people were out, people moved on to other jobs. And when the project restarted, the resources that came back into play, both from the vendor, the customer side, they were different faces and different attributes, and it was almost like restarting the project. So to have a dedicated resource on the project is vitally important. The next one was they had fun in the sandbox. And really what this means is when you have an opportunity to get into a sandbox environment doing testing and training, stretch the envelope on what you think the feature functions are. Go outside of the norms. Put in exception processing. I mentioned what happens on the third Tuesday of the month when I have to do XYZ function. Go in there and play with the software, see if you can break it, see if there are things that you're exploring that you have dialogue on or need more information on. I can assure you that the vendor will be responsive, as well as the third-party integrator, to make sure that you get the answers that you have. And then lastly, a well-defined scope, statement of work, and budget. All these fall into play with just the overall success and the tenor of the project. So in summary, a successful project starts with the right solution for the system requirements. The requirements gathering phase initially to make sure that you have everything that you need, that all of the check boxes have been made, all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted. Next, it's structured with an implementation plan that includes the following: the vendor integrator tasks and responsibilities. Help decide whether you need a third-party integrator if you're a customer that doesn't have a big bench strength to be able to supplement the activities that are going to occur. A well-defined customer task and responsibilities, which is the client-side responsibilities. And it has a multidisciplinary team, and this includes from the vendor, the integrator, and the customer. Also inclusive of operations, IT, and change management. So what really wraps this up is it's led by the right project manager that gets it and wants it and has the capacity to do it.
Awesome. Thanks, Greg. We've got a couple of questions here. And so I'm going to remind everyone too, if you have any questions, please go ahead and use them using the chat functionality. But looks like we've got a few here. The first one is, what do you consider the most important thing a project manager can do to make a project succeed?
Thanks, Brenda. Yeah, so I think first and foremost, the one that we hear most often is you need to discuss the risks often and raise your hand and the attention to the problems or opportunities when they become issues. These will push the schedule and the budget and the scope. So make sure that you have open dialogue and everything is documented and in play for your weekly or bi-weekly steering committee.
Thank you. The next one, how would you recommend preparing for the possibility of a change in key project leadership in the middle of the project? And I think you touched on this a little bit, but maybe they want you to expand a little bit more on it.
Yeah, I did. So really to lessen the impact of any leadership change is that you have to have the ability and preconceived notion that you may want to onboard a successor very quickly. And it depends on what role they're coming into. But what's really important is you needed to have documented the roadmap from the very beginning, from the inception of the statement of work to the current day, which is critical. And then equally important is you have to capture, note, publish, and have available any important decisions that were made along the way and why they were made.
Thank you. And then last one that I see here is, what do you do if you do not have a dedicated team?
Well, a dedicated team really ensures the continued success. So I would say that you need to ensure that the tasks that are on the project plan are correctly defined and documented. So a project plan that has 40 lines, I would be skeptical of. Each of them need to have the burden of who's responsible, when it's due, and anything that might be a blocker. So projects in and of themselves should be task-based. So the reason for that is to ensure that each task is assigned to an individual or a team, has a due date, and then the resources that that's assigned to have confirmed, signed off on, understand what the definition is and what the due date is. I've seen in a team project plan where I've got multiple individuals assigned to tasks, somebody always makes the assumption that somebody else is doing it. So when you're defining those critical roles for each of the task definitions and the due dates, it really should have one name painted to it. Now they can have supporting people underneath of them, but ultimately it should be the responsibility of one individual for each of those tasks. And then really the real difference in that is project planning and project scheduling. A good PM really has to plan very well, and they need to plan buffering for these handoffs timing wise in order to explain the tasks and to confirm the results and to make sure that each of these due diligence line items are being completed on time, on track, and on budget.
Yeah, Greg, I think the only thing I would add to that too is I think this is probably one of the biggest challenges that we see working with our clients. It's because they all have, day-to-day jobs. And that doesn't go away. Just because you're doing a systems implementation, more often than not, it just gets added to people's plate. There are times where people are pulled from their role during the duration of the implementation or the project, but for the most part, I think it's really just an additional responsibility. And I do think that, if you don't have a dedicated team, meaning they do have a job that they have to continue to do, then looking at strategically, where can you maybe bring on people like a third party, which is what we do, and what areas can they support you? There's areas where I think you definitely want someone to be in-house and you want them to manage it. But I do think that there are other opportunities for you to try to distribute some of that workload a little bit more efficiently, to ensure that, one, the project is successful, and then two, that you don't burn out your current employees.
Thanks, Brenda. I appreciate it.
Awesome.
Well, I'd like to thank the audience. I'm going to give back about 30 minutes of your day. I appreciate you attending. Please look on your calendar for our next upcoming webinar, September 21, 2022. It will likely be around this time Central. And the topic is winning process documentation and process plans. You can find the details on the full series of all our webinars at alpinesupplychain.com. Again, thanks for your participation. Have a great rest of your Wednesday, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it.